In this second lecture on basic logic, we're going to be talking about Teller's preference to use the term transcription over translation, how to group translations, and their adequacy. Teller gives his case for using the term transcription over translation. In translations, you expect all or most of the meaning to be intact and communicated. Teller gives a better explanation here also than I did in the previous lecture about the use of but as and in logic. In English, but often means and contrary to what I just said would lead you to expect. So and does the work to explain how two atomic statements are conjoined, but the other common use implications of the word are not communicated in logic. This is part of Teller's argument for the term transcription over translation. And Teller is right to be more precise here. It's the job of the logician, the philosopher, and the scientist to be as precise as possible. However, this is a problem when dealing with everyday language. In becoming a logician, a philosopher, or scientist, we should be learning how to articulate ourselves logically so that we can translate our thoughts into pure logic and not have to transcribe them. This requires us to recognize the ambiguities of our quotidian discourse and avoid them to keep our meanings clear, concise, and honest. In short, if we clarify our thinking, we should be able to avoid this difficulty. However, we will often need to transcribe instead of translate when analyzing other people's arguments, because not everyone thinks clearly and logically. As logicians, we can take the high road and try to avoid this burden that we often impose on each other. A further difficulty we can work to avoid is the ambiguity of bad English. If commas are not properly placed, the meanings of statements can become ambiguous. For example, if someone describes themselves, "I am a daughter, sister, and wife," the first comma separates the concepts of daughter and sister, and the Oxford comma separates the concept of sister from wife. If we remove the Oxford comma, as people often do, then this person would be communicating an unlawful marriage with her brother. If we shuffle the words around and neglect the first comma, we get, "I am a sister wife and a daughter," perhaps communicating involvement in a polygamous marriage. Teller clearly communicates the ambiguities bad English creates in logic, so let's look at his examples. His examples are, "Eve is clever and is dark-eyed," or "Adam is blonde." "Eve is clever and Eve is dark-eyed," or "Adam is blonde." The placement of the commas communicate which statements are intended to be whole statements, which, as we've seen, affects their truth values. The first sentence reads, "P and Q," in parentheses, or R. The second reads, "P and Q or R," in parentheses. The primary operator in the first sentence is or, so it's a disjunction. This overall statement will be true so long as one of the disjuncts is true. The second statement is a conjunction, so both statements must be true for the conjunction to be true. In this section on adequacy, Teller addresses the temptation to transcribe compound statements like, "Adam is neither ugly nor dumb," as not P or not Q. But if we translate that back to English, we get, "Adam is not ugly," or "Adam is not dumb." So articulated, Adam can still be ugly or dumb, but the original statement says that neither is the case. Teller gives us a couple transcription tests. The first transcription test tells us that to check a transcription of an English sentence, transcribe it back into English as literally as possible. To the extent that the original and the transcribed sentences say the same thing, you have reason to think that you have an adequate transcription. The second transcription test tells us that, given a statement of propositional logic, as a proposed transcription of an English sentence, try to imagine a case described in terms of an assignment of truth values to the sentence letters, which makes one of the sentences true and the other false. If there is such a case, reject the proposed transcription. If there is no such case, then you have an adequate transcription. The way this is explained is not clear to me, but if I'm interpreting it correctly, it's saying to compare the truth tables of the proposed statements like so. We can see from the truth tables that all of the possible cases are identical for not P or Q and not P and not Q. That is, they have the same truth table definitions. From this, we can see that the statements are logically equivalent, but we can reason our way to this realization also. If you think about it, you should realize that to say it's not the case that either P is true or Q is true is the same as saying it's not the case that P is true and it's not the case that Q is true. We will call this De Morgan's law in the next lecture when we look a little closer at logical equivalence, truth, and contradiction.